used. I love his headsets. They're fantastic. But he's a very, very interesting man. And I hope you've taken the time to go look at his biography, because you will never have a presenter at an amateur radio uh, meeting or event that is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And Dr. Bob Heil is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So I'm not going to take any more time. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bob Heil. With that, let's give him a round of applause. Thank you, Doctor.
Okay. Thank you very much. Very much. I love coming to the club meetings and sharing some of the science of this great hobby. You want to make me full screen, so I have a lot of other slides that I do them from here. So if not full screen for your computer, you'll probably want to make that so you can make it all happen. Okay, we're in our studio here in Belleville, Illinois, which is about 15 miles straight east of the Great Arch of downtown St. Louis. And our plant where we build the microphones is somewhere about 8 miles north of here in Fairview Heights. And so we're all in Illinois. I'm going to take a little bit of time to talk about where I came from, how I got into ham radio. That's such an important thing to me. I started out with a Harvey Wells TBS 50D my parents bought for me. And the reason I got into that, at the age of 12 in 1952, my parents bought me a Hammond organ. That was an expensive thing, and they weren't wealthy people. But it was right across the street from Walter Ash. And I'd take a lesson on the organ, and then I'd go across and see all that. Well, in a couple of years, I said, I got to do this. So I got my technician license in 1956. And I enjoyed 6 meters because it was open all the time. When I tell people that, they don't believe me, because today it's a wasteland, 6 meters. Then it was like 20 meters because of the sunspot cycle. It was the largest sunspot cycle ever. And so I was just going nuts. Of course, it was on AM. And Gonsets ruled then. Everybody had a bunch of Gonsets. But one night I'd been on the air for about 2 weeks, and I heard this ridiculous signal. I couldn't understand him. It was all distorted. I came back the next night, and he was still there. And I hit some buttons. I'm a new ham now. I hit some buttons, and one of the buttons was a BFO in the Helicrafters XX99. Well, all of a sudden, it just happened to be set at the right place. There was a voice, and I'm going, uh-oh, that's that single sideband stuff that I'm reading about. And so I called him. He was so thrilled that I came back because nobody would talk to him. Larry Burroughs had built one of the very first 6-meter single sideband stations. And I was just mesmerized with all of that. And so we got to talking. I told him at that time, this is all happening very quickly, just months apart. I became the organist at the St. Louis Fox Theater, the Mighty Fox. And I'd go in and I'd play for, about 8 minutes. And then the movie would start and run for 2 or 3 hours. So Larry said, why don't you come and see me? He gave me the address. I rolled up in front of it. It's KMOX radio. Larry Burroughs, K0DGE, was the chief engineer of CBS KMOX. He took me under his wing, and I spent quite a bit of time in between all my breaks. And one time I said, would you build me one of those sideband transmitters? Oh, he said, I can't do that, but I'm going to teach you how. And he did. So he gave me a laundry list, go to Walter Ash, buy a Central Electronics 10B kit. You're going to put it together, but don't put the 20-meter coil in. They were plug-in coils. He said, we're going to get a grid dip meter. You want a Millen grid dip meter, nothing else. And then you buy a chassis, 36 megacycle oscillator, a crystal, a 6U8, and so on. and he taught me how to build a 36 megacycle oscillator. So what we end up with when you plug that 36 meg into that crystal socket and you have taken and rewound the 20-meter coil to 6 meters, guess what you get? 6 meters. And so I was one of the first 10, as I understood from the league, on single sideband. I needed a VFO though. So how are you going to do that? Well, we went to Fair Radio, a lot of ads in magazines about them, all of the just an insane surplus gear. And I bought that for $5. And Wes Shum, who was the founder and president of Central Electronics, he was the first single sideband transmitter in amateur radio, 1948. And you're going to say, well, no, it was Art Collins. Art was 6 years late to the party. And so Wes really opened the windows. And we built that VFO, and away we went. The station grew quickly, and I'm still playing at the Fox and having all things going on. You're going to say, what has all this got to do with it? Well, it has a lot of things, because that organ had not been played in 20 years. And the organist there was Stan Can. He was almost a celebrity, or he was a celebrity in St. Louis. He was on local television every day playing for a ladies' show on a Hammond organ. But we had to voice and tune these pipes. And that was something that allowed me to learn to listen. A lot of people hear, that's a physical process, but not a people, they don't listen. That's a mental process. Getting in there and digging to all of the harmonic values and things like that. Well, at the same time, I wanted more power. So I built a 6 and 2 Thunderbolt that I bought for Walter Ash. You see that Central Electronics, I'd mounted it in a rack above me. And immediately I had about 1.5 kilowatts on 6 and 2 meter sideband. One of my local ham buddies was a Motorola dealer, and another one of my friends was a contractor. He had booms and cranes. And so they put up a 110-foot Roan, and a 36-foot long boom had 11 element wide space on 6 meters. Above it was a J beam for 2 meters. You can imagine what kind of signal this had. And being one of the first on sideband was really something. One day I got a call from Bob Drake, the Bob Drake. He said, "Are you the guy that's got that kilowatt on 6 and 2 meters?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "I want to invite you to one of our club meetings. We do technical meetings, and we only do them once a year. And we're looking for people with new ideas, new technologies, and so on. And we want to hear how you did that single sideband station." I wanted Larry to go, but CBS wouldn't let him off. So we took off. A friend of mine, another ham buddy, he had a Bonanza airplane. He said, "I've heard about that. Let's go." So he flew me out. Where did we go? We went to the Biltmore Hotel. The Biltmore Hotel was in downtown Dayton, Ohio. It was the beginnings of the Dayton Hamvention. From 1952 to 1974, it was in the Biltmore. What was really great is they took all the furniture out of one of the floors, and all of these wonderful people were there. Art Collins had his whole team there, and we had Wes Shum, of course, and just a variety of things. I got to meet and speak with Carl Mosley, Bill Halligan, on and on and on. And these were like celebrities to me because I'd been reading about them in the magazine. Well, while we were there, the J-Beam company came to me and said, "Hey, would you like to do an experiment with one of our antennas?" I said, "Well, I have your 8/8 now, and I love it." He said, "Well, we're going to send you out a pretty large size if you can handle that." I do it. And so what did they do? They sent a 128 element 2 meter array. This was really something for little Bobby Heil, let me tell you. But Motorola dealer and the contractor, K9 EBA and K9 SGD, they helped me. It took us a couple of days and a crane to put all this together, get the phasing harnesses right. That was the first time that I'd really understood what phasing was all about. And while all this is still going on, I knew a lot about Hammond organs because I had built a very special 3-manual one in one of the restaurants that I had played for. I'd played about 12 years from the age of 12 all the way out. And you see all those instruments, they are all keyed from the 3 keyboards of the Hammond. I used pinball machine solenoids and the piano, all that stuff. And it was really quite something. People around the Midwest would come in busloads to hear it. But I got a call one day again from the Fox. I had pretty much settled in my playing bit. I was playing around with stuff, and they said, "Hey, we're throwing out some of our speakers. Would you like to have them?" Well, the ham doesn't throw anything away. Of course I did. So I get a big truck and go up, get these Olson bins. Harry Olson, RCA, was the designer. Those things are 16-foot horns. There's 4 of them. I just showed you 2. And then we built some mid-range horns that were All-Tech front loads. And of course, I got all this stuff. And kids around here, they knew that there was this guy with a soldering iron. So these bands around the Midwest would come and I could help them fix things, build things, do things. But the ham radio kicked in me. I started designing and building systems, big systems for arenas and so on. And it was a fascinating time in my life. We started building amplifiers. The amplifiers were very special. We did the thing with Crown, by the way. That was interesting. In that Crown, they didn't want their amplifiers to be played by the devil's music. And so they licensed me to buy their DC 300s, and I had to have a special sticker that they made, and it didn't have Crown on it. It was Heil sound. But these were just great times. The amplifiers we made were modular. You get a band and they go out and all of a sudden something happens and they blew out one side. What do? They go home. The gig's over. No, they bought an amplifier from us, one of our Omega amplifiers, and it came with a toolkit and they could just plug in things. We were building all kinds of stuff and doing some little shows around. Here comes the Fox again, calling me. "Hey, Heil, it's George Bales." "Yeah? What you got?" He said, "Do you have those speakers working that I gave you a couple years ago?" "I do." He said, "We got a big problem here." And so for all of you historians, you probably know what's coming next. The Grateful Dead had a sound man that was on probation. He was not to be out of the state of California. But they had a deal where they were going to play for a Hells Angels funeral. Hells Angel was their security. And they had to get to New Jersey. So they figured they'd go to New Orleans, St. Louis, Ohio, and New Jersey. These Midwesterners, they'll sneak in there. They'll never know. Well, Owsley was on probation. He owned the gear and he ran the sound. The FBI and the DEA knew about it. So they got tickets in the back row and they sat there. At the end of the show, the band came on to St. Louis. There were no cell phones or anything. "Hey, Owsley, we'll see you at 3:00 at the Fox." Okay. Well, he finished loading the truck and padlocked it. And the DEA and the FBI padlocked him. Off to California they went. George says, "You got to talk to this guy because they get here and there's no sound system. Can you help him?" And he turned the telephone over to Jerry Garcia. And I told him I had Macintosh amps, I had some of ours, and he was all enthused because they figure, a couple of honchos out here in the Midwest, well, they know. Well, hello. And it was the beginning of a big deal for me and Heil Sound and so many. There was a journalist there that night, and he wrote the story, and you can follow it. Go into Google and put the night rock and roll sound was born. And it's the whole story of how the Dead came and got saved by this guy from Southern Illinois. It's quite a story, and it's out there floating around. The night rock and roll sound was born. But from there, things got crazy. After that show, we were all over the Billboard and all of the kinds of magazines, and managers were calling me so I could do sound for them. Dolly Parton was 24 years old. Buck Owens, these are all Nashville stars. One of my first big major concerts was Jimi Hendrix. Janis Joplin opened for him, and his bass player, Noel Redding, I had taken a 30-inch speaker, Electro Voice built that for their Patrician. It was a hi-fi cabinet. And I built it. You can see Ye Old Music Shop. That was the name of my music store that I had started. There's one of the Heil Sound mixers, one of the very first ones. And guys were all over me to rent that. But the show at the Fox was very interesting. That's just a piece of it. And you really want to go check it out in Billboard because it gives you the history. But bands were coming from all over. Kansas came over from Topeka one night. They had played Friday night in a bar in Topeka. They drove all through snowy Missouri, they told me, and got there the next morning and bought that mixer you see down there in the front. That's one of our mixers we built. They went back to Kansas and recorded Dust on the Wind. True stories. And I really wasn't sure what was all going on here because I'm just a little kid from Marissa, Illinois. And wow, I guess we were doing things that the big West Coasters weren't. So away we went. Well, I get a call from the Who. And he said, the manager, he said, we need you in Boston tomorrow night. I said, I can't do that. I'm out with Chaka Khan. I'm on a contract in Chicago. She's using one of our talk boxes. She said, I don't care what she's using. We need that big sound system tomorrow night in Boston at the Gardens. So I got a guy in Chicago that was a friend of mine. He covered that Chaka Khan date. I said, well, how are we going to do this? I have a 40-foot semi. Heil Sound was the first sound company that didn't travel around in Volkswagen vans. I actually leased a 40-foot semi and a licensed driver. And the reason I did that is that a lot of times the gear wouldn't all get there at the same time. But you're looking at a guy, in all my 82 years, I've never tasted beer. I've never smoked anything. And for gosh sakes, never did drugs. I was the straightest guy on the tours. But they knew that and they respected that. I respected their talent. And we went through so many decades and they loved what we did. And so away we went to good old Boston, took the semi. Went on, wait a minute, how are you going to get there overnight? I said, I got to do this. He said, you go out to the airport and you lease a Tiger Freight 707. I've never done that before. I said, you paying, right? Oh, yeah. And so we drove our semi up into the airplane and away we went, and we got to Boston and saved their tour. I was with them for 6 years. They became very, very dear, close friends, especially Pete Townsend and I. And I ended up living in London for 4 years on and off, doing a lot of shows in Europe and so on with him. But it just grew and grew and grew. Everybody was after Heil Sound. Joe Walsh came along with the James Gang, actually before the Grateful Dead thing. We found out we were hams at about that second show. And one of the things that we were doing, he was starting a new band called Barnstorm, and he had a little gadget that he had a 3-inch speaker and a funnel, and he drove that 3-inch speaker with a guitar amp. Now he's in the studio, so it's very, very low. He said, "Whoa, we're building this in my plant." And Marissa, he said, "What are we going to do about that box thing? I don't know what you're talking about." He said, "Well, we got to have something that's really loud." And so I understood then what he was talking about. Long story about that, but another ham radio operator, Alvino Ray, in 1939, did that same little deal with a funnel and a little tube, drove his guitar amp, so on. Well, that was just lasted for a record. So, well, we wanted a biggie, so I did. We put a 100-watt driver, had my fiberglass shop build that little case. The Heil talks about the dock box was on the air, and became a very, very instrumental instrument to many. One of them was Peter Frampton, his little girlfriend, Penny, down there. Before she met up with him, she was living in Marissa. My dad had it was like 10 or 12 homes that he'd restored, and he rented them to the miners, Marissa, in the middle of Peabody Coal Company. So we, we knew her from those days. She had married one of the roadies from Humble Pie. She called me. She says, "Hey, I'm with Peter Frampton now." Well, yeah. I need a Christmas present. Don't send me a guitar. He's got a lot of them. And so I sent her a talk box, and you know the rest of that story. It made Peter's career. He'll tell you that. I've heard so many interviews, and we're very close and talk a lot. And he doubts he touts that the talk box was really what made him happen. And closing all this stuff. I probably talked too long about all this, but it's always interesting. There's a good 2 hours I can go. But who's that group? Their manager called me one day and he says, "Hey, we got this loud group, man. They're really loud and they're coming out, and I need them for this first tour. What do you do for them?" I said, "I make them sound really good and loud." Who is that group? You'll never guess. That was ZZ Top before they had beards. This is a wonderful piece of history. We're still with them, only now we build microphones. I got out of the actual sound reinforcement in 1980. When punk rock came in, I said goodbye. And but now we're building microphones for everything from Carrie Underwood to ZZ Top and many, many more. But I went on to do crazy things. I was really a big instrumental in the satellite business. I put in several thousand of these in Southern Illinois. We had a whole team of guys doing it. And I also was, for 5 years, we were a beta test team for DirecTV. We started in 90. And then I had one of their prototype, whatever, beta dishes, and they'd send signals down to see how to guide the satellite and all that. There were several of us doing that, but they thought because of all of my involvement in the satellite business, I knew what to do. This is the vice president of RCA DirecTV coming to St. Louis, across the river from Heil Sound, and that's the very first DirecTV put in a home. But we were just having so much fun doing all the new technologies. I also got into home theater business, not your little Best Buy $100. These were all $200,000, $300,000, all incredible Macintosh, phase linear, all kinds of really wonderful amplifiers, clip speakers, JBL, so on. And we built all this that was inside our plant. One of them we were getting ready to ship out. But it was all great fun, and we enjoyed those days. One day I got a call from Paul Klipsch. I couldn't believe it. Phone rang. I answered. "That you, Heil?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "This is Klipsch here." Paul Klipsch was the father of the folded horn. He was the father of the hi-fi movement. He was it when it came to audio. I want to come and see that PA. You got a PA that's a couple of kilowatt? See, that's beknownst to him because he could take 1 watt and do at least 110 dB. Very efficient speakers. So he flew his plane from Hope, Arkansas to Marissa, Illinois. Big, tall guy all day long. Well, why did you do that? Well, how come you did this? Well, why'd you do that? Where'd you learn to do that? What college? I didn't go to college. You didn't go to college? Where'd you learn all this? I said, well, I barely made it out of high school, which is true. All of my grades were D's and F's. They just kind of squeaked me out. I didn't go to school. I was making more money than my teachers playing the organ at the Fox and other things. I didn't need all this nonsense. Well, where did you learn it, Heil? I learned it from amateur radio. Really? Yes. Ham radio was my mentor, my teacher, and my college education, and it still is today. And so Paul put me in his plane, took me back to Hope, Arkansas. And the next couple of days was incredible. That's an old telephone exchange building that Paul got from, they vacated it. That was his lab, and it was amazing. And he's standing in front of his corner horns. He made it out of plexiglass as a demonstrator to show you all of the intricate little angles that it had. But the deal with the K horn, if you've never experienced, notice I didn't say here, if you've never experienced the K horn, here's the deal. The speaker, as you see there, is shaped like this, and it sits in the corner of your room. And you had to have an 8-foot wall this way and an 8-foot wall that way. Your room made up the last of the 16-foot, which would produce 32 and 16 cycles. And it's an experience to ever experience what 16 cycles is in your living. But Paul just got me cornered for several days and started telling me things that I needed to know. And he said, the first thing I want to do, I'm going to give you this. It's still with me. It's my Bible, the Audio Cyclopedia. It's 1,750 pages of anything you think you ever knew about audio. And I say almost at least once a week, there's something in here that I need to reference. And Paul gave that. Then he started in. He said, you need to find out about the telephone system. I said, what about it? He said, well, when they put it together, it didn't work. What do you mean it didn't work? They ran 2 wires from New Jersey out to California. And they had every 500 miles, had a relay station to keep the audio up, signal up, voltage up. Okay. But there was a problem. When they inputted the signal in New Jersey, that's what they did. And when they got out to the coast, it didn't work right. It didn't sound good. Here's a great demonstration. Pay attention. Listen. Here is what the first telephone system sounded like. All I did was remove between 2 and 3K because these guys and gals, they discovered that there was a magical frequency for audio, 2.5K. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm not touching bass. I'm not touching anything but this parametric equalizer, and I can pick out 2.5K. Listen what happens when I bring it back in. Here it comes. There's a 1K, 2K, but the minute 2.5 hits, oh, beautiful. All the F and the S's, they're beautiful. They're easy to understand. Before you couldn't understand, they're all mushy. Notice that's 3K wide. That's what a telephone system is. 3K wide, but elevated. And who found that? Well, it was partially those people, 4,000 of them. They put 4,000 scientists. This was a big major project. It had to work, and it wasn't. The two leads happened to be Dr. Harvey Fletcher and Weldon Munson. They really broke the barrier. They discovered the problem. What do you think the problem was? It's you, your ears. You absolutely no way hear flat. And if you do, it's not going to be very good. What they discovered, along with the 4,000, at 100 to 110 dB, it's almost flat. That's why kids like to listen to their music loud. They hear it all. But look down here where you're listening at 20 or 30 dB. It better have some type of equalization to bring that 2.5 up. Well, now, wait a minute. This is 1920s. They didn't have any equalization. The word wasn't even formed, probably. So how'd they do it? They did it passively. I did the low pass on the right, that's just there for grins. They did a high pass filter, the right size of a capacitor and a right size of resistor to ground. The capacitor takes everything through, but then the resistor takes the base out, and the two of them combined will cause that 2.5 to rise. And it's just absolutely amazing when you think about this, because everybody's EQ crazy. Well, we didn't have EQ. Now, I want you to check this out. I want you to listen and write it down if you want to know. We had no equalizers until 1967. Think about that. Well, we had a hi-fi system. We had a little bass and treble. All it was one of these high-pass filter jobs. You could vary it a little bit. It wasn't great, but it was something. Well, in 1967, I was just getting into the sound reinforcement business. I had heard about Langevin, who was, they still there. They build mixers and all kinds of processor and stuff for movie films. And I heard that they had come up with the first active equalizer. I'd get on an airplane, I'd take off, and bingo. What did I see when I got in there? The very first equalizer. Now, to you guys, it's like, big deal, Heil. I got 5 of those in my ham rig. No, this had not happened yet. I went crazy. And they also were building mixers for all of the film people, because in those days, that green mixer is what I mixed so many of those groups. I did Jimi Hendrix and Walsh and all kinds of guys there for a few years. There was no EQ. And it was really hard, very, very difficult to mix, because it was hard to see where they were all set to and stuff like that. So I had heard all of this about Langevin. So they showed me their equalizer. Okay, good. They said, but you might want to be interested in this. They took me around the corner, and this is what I saw. And you got to understand, to you guys and gals, you're going, oh, big deal, Heil. That's all. In 1967, this was not there. I was watching the first one of these come off the production line. Well, of course, I bought 2 of them. And I was going to buy that equalizer, but he said, wait a minute, Heil. We got something coming in about 2 minutes. Yeah, this would probably be better for you. Whoa. And of course, big deal, Heil. It's a graphic equalizer. Well, there was no graphic equalizer. You got to understand my enthusiasm in those days. I was freaking out. Well, I bought it all, had it shipped back to Marissa, had a cabinet builder build me this beautiful walnut console, 16 channels with slide controls. The 2 meters here on the left up above, that was a limiter so you wouldn't blow things up. And then you can't see it too good, but right beside it is the graphic equalizer. The flash made a little thing on it there. Can you imagine? I showed you that mixer a while ago. Can you imagine Heil Sound coming into an arena with that instead of those little? No wonder. No wonder we got going so quick. Well, I ended all that. I came back to ham radio. I'd been off the air for 12 years. I had a technician license, as I told you, but figured if I'm going to do this, 6 meters is dead. 6 meters is still dead. Now it's a contest band. Did you know that? Did you ever get on 6 meter phone? If anybody answers you, all they want is your grid square. What's your grid square? And you go, what is that? What's your grid square? And then they're gone. What? Come back here. What kind of antenna you have? What kind of transmitter? You got a wife? Where do you live? What kind of cars? No one talks to you. They just want that damn grid square. And it has ruined 6 meters. I really hate to say that. Then come along FT8. I'll shut up. You can tell the rest of my story. I got an extra class license. I came on the air, but it wasn't right. The audio wasn't my Art Collins audio. I still had my Collins, but there's all kinds of other things. I hadn't heard of these transmitters. They're all bassy and mushy and distorted. I'm going, what? What is going on? Well, I got this new radio, man. I got a matching microphone. It's in the box. It came with it. And it's called a Kenwood. It's a what? A Kenwood. That's not a washing machine, isn't it? No, man, that's my ham radio. And here's a matching microphone. The only damn thing it's matching is it's painted the same color. And it's got the right plug on it. How do I know that? Because I ended up working for them. Same thing with ICOM. Same thing with Yaesu. I work for these people. We'll get into that in a minute. But I had to do something. I couldn't let this go. And so what did I do? I built the very first equalizer for ham radio. Well, I built it for me primarily. I had bought a 520, and it was the most god-awful audio I ever heard with their whatever kind of matching microphone. I said, we got to do something. And so I built this, not knowing what's going to happen. It's a 2-band equalizer. Got a mic preamp in it. You set the gain. And it has 2 filters. One at 160 hertz, which you can cut. You don't want to boost bass. You want to cut it. And where is the treble? If you don't know, then I failed here so far. It's 2.5K. Crank that baby up. You heard what happened. You got to pay attention. Well, I wrote an article. I sent it to the league. They called me and they said, we've been researching it. This is the first time any kind of equalization has been brought to ham radio. We're going to publish your article. It will get the cover award and be the lead article. Well, it was a do-it-yourself, DIY, and all the schematic parts, easy to do. And I wanted you to build it. I want you to build. My mistake was that I put my phone number in there. I started getting all these phone calls. They wanted me to build. When I told you Heil Sound was closed from 1980. But I called back a couple of my great solder gals, and we started building EQ 200s. And it was the entrance of Heil Sound. It was the first product of Heil Sound in amateur radio. So built by those who care in Marissa, Illinois. It was the first entrance that we did to ham radio. And the rest of it was just so cool. And we really, really helped a lot of people. I get a call one day. No, I get a letter. I get a call from Dr. Inouye. Dr. Inouye was the founder and the president of ICOM. And he had a picture of his station It had their IC 781. Remember that? That's a great contest rig. It was the first rig that had a scope in it. It was a real CRT scope. And it had, the picture had my equalizer, and it had my gold line on one of my booms. I was the first company to bring booms to this industry. Why? I did it for me. Because whenever you hear me on the air, I am never just sitting, I'm soldering, doing da 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 da. And I got to have the microphone. Like now, I can't hold it. And so I brought booms. And now, oh my God, thousands and thousands a month out of here to broadcasters and podcasters and ham radio and everything else. But he had all that going. And he said, I'm thinking of new radio line. And I want to use your EQ 200. And it will become the lead of the Pro 1, Pro 2, Pro 3, and all the way through the ICOM line to the great 7851, to 7610, the great little 705. All of those has the EQ 200 in it. And so I was just really humbled and blown away by this, very, very honored, because we're talking big stuff now. And I started working with them and helping them do things. And the biggest problem we had, though, is they didn't have very good instructions. So we started a website just for that. It's grown now to, oh my gosh, just the section on how to adjust your radio is about 50 pages. Well, how do you do that? What's the very first thing that you do when you sit down at a radio? I know, turn it on. What's the first thing? Tell it what you're going to do. Are you going to do contesting? Are you going to do rag chew? Are you going to do net control? You have to tell it. Set the transmitter bandwidth. That's the first thing you do. Okay, we're going to do rag chew. Beautiful. You want to adjust the equalizer to -3 and the treble to +3 or so. That'll get you started. The transmitter bandwidth is going to be wide. It's going to be 100 on the low end and 2900 on the top. If you want to do contesting, we'll get into that later, but here's how you set it up. What's the first thing? You go down to that bandwidth, TBW, transmit bandwidth, set it wide, 100 to 29, and go down here, -2, +3. You got to feather those out, play with them a little bit. If you're going to do contesting, aha, wow. What do you do there? You set it at 500 on the low end, 2500 on the top end. And then roll off all the bass, everything. Then what that allows you to do is you've narrowed it up. I got a little crazy demo. This will go with you. You're going to think about this. And you're going to pass it on to everybody else. You're going to say, that's stupid, Heil. You get a balloon to tell us how to set a transmitter. Yeah, that's true. Think about the air in this balloon being RF. It's all pretty flat, but you've opened that 2.5. Now, when we narrow it to 500 to 2,500, you have a gate open. What's the gate? 2.5K. So when you hear a contest station and he's in your face, that's why, because all of his RF power is at 2.5. Why would he want to do that? Of course, for beautiful articulation. He wants to get those rare calls through. And if you're going to do some big, wide, the whole rag chew thing, no. You've wasted so much of your power, because power is wasted in that low end. anything above below 300. It's wasteful. And then you adjust up the 2.5 a little and you have a really nice sounding signal. But those are things that people just don't understand. They're not going to agree with you. But we're talking science here. We're not talking about Bob Heil. We're not talking about the audios. We're talking about the science of it. And that is the science. Dr. Inouye asked me also to build him a proper microphone. That's why I knew they didn't build their own. They get them OEM, they paint their name on it, and they've fooled you for years. It came in the box, Heil. Well, good for you. This is the microphone for ICOM. Of all of the thousands that we've produced and still do, I've never heard a bad report. I've never heard a bad one. I heard one time. The guy had all the equalizers off and rolled it up the bass. It's like, come on, punch it up right. That's great. It's a wonderful microphone, and I'm very proud of it because it's helped so many. And that's what you want for your ICOM. A couple years later, Dr. Hasegawa came in my booth at Dayton. Big, tall Japanese guy. His family owns Yaesu. I want to do it better. I said, whoa, what are we talking about here? Talking about the EQ stuff. Well, I said, the only way to do it better would be with a parametric. Yeah, that'd be good. I said, not so fast. What'd be the problem? You see, with my EQ 200, I set the frequencies. All you get to do is increase, decrease. With a parametric equalizer, we're going to do 3 filters. None of them are labeled. You have to find out where 9 buttons go. And I told Dr. Hasegawa, I said, your biggest problem will be education. No, we take care. Well, they didn't. I designed them. And when I look at their books and their manuals, it's just a bunch of gobbledygook. It doesn't say anything. So we started doing it and doing it right. Here's how you do a Yaesu. They're all the same. I got a new 101. Well, it's all the same as the 5,000 or the 9,000 or any of their rigs. After the 9,000, they all have the equalizer, which is parametric. They all have the same settings. They might have different names, but they're all the same. Here's how you do it. You're going to have, let's take one filter. It's going to be frequency, level, width, bandwidth. And you got to do that 3 times. Here it is. How simple. Forget all that gobbledygook on the left. That just so you can write it down or whatever. Okay. You set the first filter at 200 on the frequency. You want to minus at 3 dB, maybe 4 or 5. And the bandwidth of 2 octaves. Don't argue with it. Just set it at 2 octaves. That's how wide that filter will work. What's the next one? 900. Why do I pick 900? Because there's something really strange in audio between about 600 and 1,000, 1,100. It's real boxy sounding. All of it. Do this as you talk, and you'll hear that boxy sound that I want to get rid of. And you do 900 minus 3 or 4, 2 octaves. But where are we going to put the third one? Of course, 2.5 plus 8. That's the magic in it, is that 2.5. We've proven that. Maybe I'll do that again. I mean, so many people just don't understand this. I only am this is a parametric equalizer. So I'm going only for the 2.5. Here we go. It's gone. I did not turn up the bass. I just eliminated 2.5. And so you're talking about F and the S and the P and the B. They're all just mushy. The way I hear a lot of signals on the air today. Shut up, Heil. Okay, here comes back. Now pay attention how articulate this gets when it gets up to, there's 1K coming on around. And the minute it hits 2.5, it's just magic. It's magic. That F and S are perfect. That's how you set a Yaesu. All Yaesus from the 101 all down. Here's a graph of what you see, you can raise or lower the level, and then you can move it around, all of that. But here's the meat and potatoes. This is on my website. This is all you need to know. Just what we went through, but it's laid out so you can understand it. One other thing they do, all down in red in the bottom, if you turn a processor on, you have to totally re-equalize it. Now, I have a question for you. Why do you use that? Nobody can answer a right answer about compression. Well, it makes me louder. No, it makes you distorted. Big time. You should never use compression. Let equalization, proper microphone, and how to use it. We're going to talk about that in a minute. That is the golden thing about amateur radio. You don't need all that goggly goop. I built the proper microphone for, I started out building this just for the Yaesu, but oh my gosh, it's now the podcaster's dream, broadcasters, AM and FM stations. It's just a marvelous microphone. It's really good. And we also build the PR22 that I'm talking into. Has great articulation. And I built this at the invite of Paul Rogers of Bad Company and our good buddy Joe Walsh. They said, hey, want you to build me a microphone that I don't have to just be stuck on. You know this story. What the hell happened to my audio? I didn't change anything. It's a 70-year-old design microphone. But that's why you always see them right here. Because if they move off, it's gone. It's like, what? What? That's why they got to be right here. Paul Rogers didn't want that. Neither did Joe. Listen to the difference. Listen to the difference. It's totally amazing. And I built the front end omnidirectional. You can move around a whole 180 and it doesn't go away. It's a proper microphone. What's wrong with these guys? You know why? It's ego and habit. Trust me, I've been with thousands and thousands of entertainers over my career, and that's what it boils down to. But once they ever hear something that's right, Carrie Underwood, Keith Urban, so many others. And I'm so proud that I could help their careers. And it's really, really something. But again, you have to realize hearing is physical. Listening is a mental process. So we want to do that. What are you doing about AM gear? Old vintage gear. You guys building any? I sure hope the heck you do. That's about all I do anymore. That whole side of the room. There's the sideband transmitter that I built in 1958, still on the air. I put it back on 20 meters and all the other band. And then the Harvey Wells, you can't see it, but it's down below. Harvey Wells is still with me. I love this stuff. The ICO is amazing. ICO has they were big in a hi-fi world. And they took one of their hi-fi amps, took out the 8-ohm transformer to drive a speaker, put a 5,000 ohm. It makes an incredible modulator. Oh my God, it's really great. People don't believe I'm in a little ICO. But if you need equalization for it, why, this is what you got to do right here. Julius Jones. Notice how I set that up. You don't just go from one to the other. I see guys doing equalizers like, no, you feather it. You sneak up on it. We start off at 50 and we want to get up to 200. So we just kind of stair step it up and we stay level all the way out to 16. Now we're going to stair step it up to 25 at 24. And that's how you set it. It's amazing. There's also another one. Believe it or not, this is still being built. Sergey has a wonderful equalizer, and he builds it in Ukraine. It's amazing. I'm so happy for him. UR6QW. And these things really help. And the thing you want to think about is the bandwidth of your transmitters and the filters. That's very important. Very important. And because if a lot of guys will have a rig that's only has 2.4 wide filters, and that's good for DX or whatever, but they're trying to one of our PR40s and broadcast mics, and they call me, this thing don't work. Well, what's your bandwidth? Well, it's only 2.4. Well, it's not the microphone. You did that. You need to do that. So that I told you earlier about bandwidth. It's really important. And in the AM window, there is a thing such as an AM window. And it's really sad that a lot of guys have lost that. The story is, after I got on the air, I was on 6 meters, so I wasn't down with all the big boys, but I listened a lot. Sideband came in the 50s, and they would just go wherever they wanted. Well, the AMers, man, we're crystal controlled. We can't move. And so they became some wars. Big time. Guy from Paducah, he got tired of this new sidebander down in Tennessee. He said, I'm going to go visit him. He went and knocked on this guy's door, this big sidebander that was just the king of the roost. When he opened the door, here's this AM guy with a shotgun. Nobody got hurt, but he got his point across. And they sat down and said, we got to do something about this because we can't move. You guys can go everywhere. And so the gentleman's agreement was formed by about 10 guys, and it allowed 3870 to 3890. That's an AM window. 7290 to 7295 is the 40-meter window. And on 20 meters, it moves around a lot, but usually it's up about 386 or so. 290. Oh, man. There's so much when 10 meters open. Go up there and listen to that. A lot of converted CB rigs that I had a lot to do with. Another story for another hour or two. But it's all fun stuff. And I'm sure you all have a scope. Gosh, I hope so. Everybody needs a scope. You can buy them for 50, 60 bucks. These are $1,000 things. But hey, I don't see an SO239. How do you do it? You go to Antique Electric Supply in Mesa, Arizona. You buy a little box. You put 2 coax connectors in it. I use a piece of RG8 going straight through, just a piece of wire straight. We're just going by. See you later. Bye. But on the input, you do a voltage divider. And there is 51K to 680. And at that junction is 0.04. That goes into that RCA jack, plugs into your scope. Bingo, you're there. And it works great. And you really need that to see if you're flat topping distortion and all that. I talked about a microphone. It's important to address it properly. And I hear so many that don't. What are you talking about, Heil? Well, I'm talking about guys that do this. They get in the old easy chair, and it sounds like a roller rink. Well, let's turn up the gain. Well, then it gets worse because you've lost all of your dynamic range. You've lost your transient response. You've lost some of the bottom end audio just because you don't know how to use a microphone. And I'm here to tell you, I don't care if you're using it wrong. I hope I'm the guy that helps you do it right because you're losing so much of your signal. It all starts at the microphone. And so many guys, I guess they just don't know. There's another thing that ticks me off. Some of these license manuals and the handbooks, come on, tell us stuff that we need that will help us. That is why I do these. This one is pretty, I think it's number 330. of these I've done since February 2020. When the pandemic started, I could no longer go to the clubs because I used to do these and travel. But you know what? I can do them better. All the computers, I got all my toys and things. But you want to be able to speak into that microphone. And that is so important. And plosives is another thing. What are you talking about? What is a plosive? That is the fact that when you speak into this microphone, you're causing the diaphragm to go down and hit the bottom of the magnet. I don't have a lot of air, but some guys have a lot of air and it just overloads everything. There's the key. They come with all of my microphones. And that just isn't some piece of foam you bought at Walmart. It's an actual foam we have made. It's acoustically transparent. So when I put it on, it didn't change. I hear guys every wonder, hey, Bill, take that stupid muff off. It sounds all muffled. It's not the real deal. But there's just so much more that we can get into. And I don't have time, but I'm going to tell you about my favorite subject. Thank you, Paul Klipsch, and so many in the audio encyclopedia, and just about everything in ham radio. Let me unplug this. I have two PR22s. I have a Y cable. I'm not playing games with different things over here. This one is like this one, different color, I know. PR22s. If you have double your power, how many decibel is that? It's 3, all right? If you went from 500 to 1,000 watts, what is it? 3. Well, here, can you hear 3 dB? Talk about listening. I'll listen. Watch. Because when I bring these together, the meter over there is going to go up 3 dB. I should put a camera on that sometime. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. What? I'm going to close your eyes. I'm going to take 3 dB away. This could be $1,000 or $2,000. 1, 2, 3. The human ear cannot detect 3 dB. You want to argue with the audio encyclopedia and 4,000 scientists? Go ahead. We can't hear the difference. Oh, if we were in an anecho chamber, studios, that maybe, but it doesn't mean much. But that's not why I really came here. I just like to show you that little guy. I built this plug, and this little plug I wired backwards. 3:2 and 2:3. Well, big deal, Heil. It still works. Yeah, so does this one. What's the deal? Well, when I speak in this one, it's in phase. The diaphragm, of course, goes down. When I speak into this one, it comes up. What happens when you have two signals out of phase? Watch the screen. This could be a magnificent part of tonight. It is for me. Watch and listen with these out of phase microphones. They cancel. They're 45 dB down. Well, they still work, but not together. One's going up, one's going down. Now, I have a whole hour on phasing. How do phase dipoles work? Some idiot piles on your frequency and you hit the notch filter. He's gone. How's that work? It takes that signal out of phase. He's gone. See you later. Ladies and gentlemen, there is so much about this hobby that's not being told. And I love it. And I have a whole thing on antennas. How did Dr. Yagi invent the Yagi antenna? He had nothing but a field strength meter and a resonant dipole. And phased arrays, I have a whole thing on that. Let's come back and I might really get into the phase thing. But I am going to leave you with this one. You will not argue. You will not contest it. Art Collins told me this one. There is nothing like a resonant dipole. Nothing. All the infrared circles, buzzes, squares, whatever. No, the resonant dipulse. But, aha, now pay attention. This is the big part of the night. A publication from Collins Radio. We going to argue with them? No. States most transmitting antennas of resonant dimensions elevated at a quarter wave above ground or as close to 100% efficiency as possible. I proved that one time. Here it is. You know what the direct ray, you look up and see the wire. Yeah, I got that, Heil. But there's another way. They're reflected. And you don't pay attention because you can't see it. But you need to know it's there. And if you can get your resonant dipole a quarter wave, you will move that reflected way up with it. And what happens? Your signal will improve drastically. I did a thing when I first came on the air in 76 with a bunch on 40 meters. This was really cool because I had read this and is this really true? Come on, Heil. Yeah, it's dead right true. I had a 70-foot tower at that location when I came on. We had a resonant dipole at 20 feet. Every night I had a guy in California, guy in New Orleans, guy in Florida, one of the guys at the comm center at Collins, and a guy in Ohio. They would find out what the atmosphere, how's signals tonight. And then one night I'd come on at 30 feet. It was a little better. Next night I would come on at 40 feet. Well, it's got to be better, right? A smidge. Come on the next night at 50 feet. Really? I come on the last night at 33 and a third, and guess what happened? Bingo. It was much stronger because we have brought that reflected ray up to the driven. Don't believe me? Try it. Can argue with art? I don't think you can argue with those guys. But there's just so much to talk about in antennas. I love antennas. And for all you guys that worry about SWR, we didn't have an SWR meter for the first 10, 15 years I was on the air. Forget it. And it worked fine. Yeah. And if you're all caught up in the SWR thing and so on, check this out. In a page in the Army book, if you're ever caught out in the field and there are no places to run an antenna, drive a nail in a tree. I did that. Oh, I only got about 20 miles, but if I was in trouble, I could talk to somebody. That really works. You should try that. Oh, by the way, I didn't have a tuner. I don't own a tuner. I have one, but I don't use it. And so your SWR guys, just put your damn dummy load on top of a tower and you'll be perfect. Nobody says it's going to resonate. But oh, golly. There's just I got to leave you with this one. When I first got into ham radio, I met K0DGE at KMOX. And I took a piece of coax up to him, to the station one day, because I was a terrible solder. I said, can you resolder? Oh, kid, you can't do this. I said, well, it's what the handbook says. You got to solder through the little holes. He said, the handbook is wrong. Whoa. A CBS engineer calling the AMS radio handbook wrong. He was right. He said, here's what you do, kid. Here's what you do. First of all, you put that connector in a vise and you solder up about a half an inch. It's going to get real hot. And when that's finished, cools down, put the center conductor, dress that right, and get that center conductor all ready to go in and all that kind of stuff. And then you take a pair of, I just use industrial scissors, cut off about 3/8 inch and solder it perfectly. Now you can guarantee the world that every single little piece of coax shield is soldered. Well, I always, after that, I did it, but I taped them up. My buddies would come and, I'm a new ham. They'd make fun of me. Look what he did. Oh my God, you didn't solder through the holes. No, it's not the right way. Well, I didn't want to argue with him. But in 2016, I had to live that under tape for those years. I visited K3LR. You know, Tim Duffy. Tim and I are good friends, and I visited his multi-million-dollar contest station. If you don't know anything about K3LR, put it in Google. Oh my gracious. No wonder he wins every contest. I look over in the corner, and here is this big bundle of coaxes coming in. And I look real close, and I look closer because he didn't have them taped up. They were all done like that. So I ran over and I shook his hand. I was real crazy. He looked at me like, "What's wrong with you, Kev?" I told him his story. He said, "No, man, no, this is the way you do it." And so it kind of vindicated what I'd been doing all these years. But I want to come back. We'll talk about pine board, how to build a 5-watt AM transmitter. We got well over 1,000 that have done that. It was my last years on Ham Nation. I wanted people to build, and boy, are they building. They're still building. Parts are available from Antique Electric Supply and so on. But there are so much more to talk about. But we're going to wind this down. And you have any questions, don't be shy, anything. Let's see what you got. Anybody?
Yeah, Bob, we have to mute the mic in the room, so we'll be changing it back and forth as they talk and you talk.
Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Heil? Okay, I'm selfish. What should I be doing on my K4, the hotshot rig?
What's that? I didn't get the question. I didn't hear his question. Oh, he's muted.
I had. What mic would you recommend for the K4 that L-Craft is producing now?
Oh, all of PR22, PR781. I love the 781. It's really great.
And
This guy.
And would I change it in using their controlled envelope single sideband that rig is capable of?
Again, I didn't hear you. It's a little echo in the room. I didn't do that again.
Would I change any equalization settings when utilizing the controlled envelope single sideband capability that rig can do?
Well, you always want to touch up the equalizer a little bit. Listen into a pair of headphones. I always listen in another receiver and headphones. But you always want to touch up EQ no matter what you change or what you do. But K4, is that amazing rig or what? Wow.
Yeah, it only costs $50, right?
Like the old drunk said, I spill more than that. Okay.
One quick question.
Hey, Bob, I've been in life for 61 years. I've used a lot of your products. And I came across, how long should a mic element last before you should be replaced? And I had got one of your mics, and after only 26 years, the element went out. Is that about right, over?
Sometimes they last forever. It depends. Probably got moisture in it, something like that. That's usually the big cause is, we have a lot of saliva that goes down through there. I hope that all of you clean those. Take the screen off. You're not going to hurt anything. Wash it. There's a foam inside here. Take it out. Wash the foam. Put that in a dishwasher and put it back together. It's very important.
Dr. Heil, I just want on behalf of the club, I want to thank you. Say that was just an absolutely just a very informative presentation. I know everyone in here and on Zoom enjoyed it. I've sent you a coffee mug with our logo on it. I hope you enjoy it. And
thank you.
with that, we'll bid you good night. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I look forward to coming back. You pick a subject, and you've heard all of this. Let's do some of the other things, especially antennas. Okay. Thanks, everybody. See you on the air, especially 3885 in the AM window in the morning.
All right.
Okay. All right. See y'all.